The Scandal of the Evangelical Conscience. And in there he really documents the same thing, that Christian behavior in the areas of divorce, sexual behavior, racism, attitudes towards materialism and the poor are really no different. Divorce rate is virtually the same, and that's in communities or that's with people who are born again and new believers. Divorce rate's the same as those who are unbelieving. Use of pornography amongst Christian men is pretty much the same as with those who are not Christian. And so, that list goes on and on and on. Youth development and youth ministry is in crisis in North America. We are not doing what we need to be doing to train and develop and teach people to live the faith they profess. And yet, youth programs are well attended. Youth pastors are able to get lots of kids to come. That's pretty much across the board. We seem to have set ourselves up for really teaching well the biblical worldview. There's lots of opportunity that we have to engage them, and yet even though young people do everything we've given them to do through high school, through college, attending youth program, attending the things that are on the side, service projects and conferences and things like that. They finish college and they get into, I guess, what we would call the real world, and their faith dissolves. They leave the church. They no longer see the Christian community as the place where they belong. And so it's a crisis because the mechanism that we have in place to develop, train, lead young people into their adult years is not generating faithfulness that is sustainable. It's not generating what the Christian faith would profess to do, which is to create followers of this person, Jesus Christ. It's what we have in place is not doing that. So we're in crisis, and as an organization, we want to see change. We want to see people become differently than they are. We want to see people live a life that is consistent with what they say they believe. We want people to have a faith and be able to take that into whatever vocation they have chosen, and not see massive disconnection between what they say they believe and then what they actually do. So to kind of wrap things up and talk a little bit about how we're doing this, change. How is it that people change? How is it that people grow to be different? If we're teaching worldview and young people are able to give that back, they're able to say that, they are able to really, they kind of understand it. Why is there not the ability to live it? And a couple of things in change research. Number one, people do need a worldview that stands up to the hardest problems that they'll face. Number two, people need authentic relationships. They need to be connected to a mentor who lives out with good character that worldview, and they need to be connected to peers who are trying to do the same thing. Number three, they need to be able to see that they can learn skills where they can make a contribution. Self-efficacy, having confidence in being able to learn and then apply. And last, service. They have to come to a point of understanding that there's something beyond myself, that it's not about me. Our model begins in the wilderness. We start there because of that environment that is incredibly dynamic, sometimes harsh, sometimes incredibly beautiful. But when we take 8 or 9 or 10 students into the wilderness with 2 instructors who have something that they badly want to teach, some incredible things happen. We're able in that environment to challenge them, to give them opportunities to try new things, to experiment with their behavior, to make decisions in a group setting, to see that they can face challenges, difficult circumstances, inconvenience, changed plans, things like that, that they can move through that, and their sense of identity, sense of who they are and what they enjoy, what they like, how they operate, becomes more known to them. So we use that adventure education small group development model. We use it very deliberately, and we use it mostly in our short programs. And then lastly, we do service learning. It's a hyphenated term, where service to others happens while learning happens, and learning happens while service to the outward community happens. And sometimes the emphasis is more on learning, and sometimes it's more on service. But these experiences really get a person who's had all kinds of learning in the classroom and put them into a setting where there are real world needs, and helps them to recognize that they have something to offer to that problem. And later we can talk a little bit about, how is service learning different than the youth pastor who sets up a service project? Aren't we accomplishing service if we're running service projects? How is it different? And there are some very pointed differences in that. So, as we go into the mealtime, I guess an opportunity that we have is to do some thinking together, to do some talking about some of those themes that you are also seeing or have experienced. How has learning and development of people how have we reduced it to viewing people as a container that get filled with knowledge, and yet do not have the opportunity to really exercise their faith until they are done with formal education. And suddenly they're in the real world, and they have all these problems that come down on them. And now for the very first time, they're having to take this borrowed faith from their parents and their churches and faith communities, and suddenly, for the first time, think about it and employ it on their own.